The mess hall at Kepler Station buzzed with the usual evening chatter. Cadets from across the galaxy sat at long metal tables, eating their dinner and sharing stories from their home worlds. The air smelled of different foods, and the mix of alien languages created a constant background noise. At table 7, near the large viewing window that showed the stars outside, 4 cadets sat together. 3 of them were aliens and 1 was human. Taman picked at his food quietly. He was 22 years old, with dark hair and calm eyes. He had arrived at the Galactic Alliance Military Academy just 2 weeks ago. The other cadets still looked at him like he was something strange. "So this is what Earth sends us," said Veltar, the reptilian Vorth sitting across from Taman. His scales were dark green and his yellow eyes gleamed with amusement. "I expected something more impressive." Chikta, the insectoid Krell warrior, clicked her mandibles in what passed for laughter among her people. Her forearms moved as she spoke. "The humans think they are warriors. My clutch mother told me stories about them." The third alien, Lysandra, was a Nyx. She looked almost human except for her pale blue skin and the way her eyes seemed to glow softly. She could sense emotions, and right now she felt nothing but calm coming from the human. It puzzled her. "What kind of stories?" Veltar asked, leaning forward with interest. Chikta's mandibles clicked again. "Foolish ones. They say humans once fought a war where they charged into enemy fire with nothing but metal sticks. They called it fixing bayonets, or something like that." "Metal sticks?" Veltar laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Against energy. Weapons?" No, Lysandra said softly. "This was before they had energy weapons. They fought with primitive guns that shot small metal pieces, and sometimes they ran out of ammunition and had to fight hand to hand." Veltar shook his head. "Even more foolish. Any sensible species would surrender when their weapons stopped working." Taman continued eating his food. He did not look up or speak. "Oh, but that is not the best part," Chikta said. "They have a saying, never give up, never surrender. Can you imagine? Even when defeat is certain, they keep fighting." "How wasteful," Veltar said. "A good commander knows when to retreat. It saves lives for the next battle." Lysandra tilted her head. "I heard something else. They say humans will keep fighting even when they are badly hurt. There are stories of human soldiers continuing to fight with broken bones and bleeding wounds." "Impossible," Veltar declared. "Pain exists to tell a body to stop. No intelligent species ignores pain." "Maybe they are not very intelligent," Chikta suggested. Her 4 eyes glittered with mischief. The conversation was getting louder. Other cadets at nearby tables began to listen. Soon, more aliens joined, in with their own stories about humans. "My podfather served with a human ship once," said a young Aquarian with blue-green skin. "He said the humans would not retreat even when their ship was badly damaged. They kept fighting until the enemy gave up and left. Probably just a story to make them sound brave," Veltar said. "I read a report," added a tall, thin ethereal whose body seemed to shimmer. "Humans once held a mountain pass against an army, 100 times larger. They all died, but they held the pass long enough for their people to escape." "Thermopylae," Taman said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. It was the first word he had spoken during the entire conversation. "What did you say?" Veltar asked. "The battle was called Thermopylae," Taman repeated, still not looking up from his food. 300 Spartans against the Persian army, though the numbers in the stories are usually wrong. "So you admit your people make up stories to sound more impressive," Chikta said. Taman finally looked up. His dark eyes were calm and serious. "I said the numbers are usually wrong. 300 is too few. There were actually about 7,000 Greeks there." 7,000 against how many?" Lysandra asked. "Maybe 200,000, Taman said. "The exact number is debated." Silence fell over the table. Even the nearby cadet stopped talking. "You are joking," Veltar said. "No," Taman replied. "And they held the pass for 3 days." "That is impossible," Chikta said. "No force that outnumbered could be held by such a small army." "They used the terrain," Taman explained. The pass was narrow. The large army could not use its numbers effectively. Eventually they were defeated, but they bought time for their cities to prepare. And they all died? The Aquarian asked. Most of them, Taman said. King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans stayed until the end. They knew they would die. Why? Lysandra asked. She genuinely wanted to understand. Why not retreat and fight another day? Taman was quiet for a moment. Because someone had to make a stand. Someone had to show that the enemy could be fought. Sometimes the example matters, more than survival. The aliens looked at each other. This was not the kind of thinking they understood. War was about winning. Dying was failure. Your people have many such stories, Veltar said. It was not really a question. Some, Taman admitted. Tell us another, Chikta demanded. Taman shook his head. You would not believe it. Try us, Lysandra said. Taman sighed. During what we call World War II, a city called Stalingrad was surrounded by enemy forces. The battle lasted for months. Buildings were destroyed. Food ran out. People ate rats and boiled leather to survive, but they did not surrender. How did it end? The ethereal asked. The attackers gave up first, Taman said simply. Veltar laughed, but it sounded forced. Now I know you are telling stories. A besieged city cannot outlast the besiegers. Usually not, Taman agreed. But Stalingrad did. These are just legends, Chikta said, but she sounded less certain than before. Maybe, Taman said. He stood up with his empty tray. But humans do not have legends about retreating. He walked away, leaving the aliens staring after him. He seems very calm for a member of such a violent species, Lysandra observed. Maybe the stories are exaggerated, Veltar said, but he did not sound convinced. Or maybe, Chikta said slowly, they are not violent at all. Maybe they are something else. What do you mean? The Aquarian asked. Chikta watched Taimin's retreating figure. I'm not sure, but I think we should find out if these stories are true. None of them noticed the human scientist sitting at a nearby table, Dr. Hyojin, who had been listening to every word. Dr. Hyojin walked through the quiet corridors of the Academy's research wing. It was late, and most of the other scientists had gone to bed. The conversation she had heard in the mess hall kept playing in her mind. She was 35 years old, and had spent most of her adult life studying alien biology. She believed in facts, not stories. The tales the cadets had been sharing sounded like the kind of legends that grew bigger with each telling. But something bothered her. The way young Taimin had spoken about those battles. He had not sounded like someone telling heroic stories. He had sounded like someone reciting historical facts. Hyojin reached her laboratory and activated the lights. The room was filled with research equipment and data terminals. She sat down at her main computer and began typing. Computer access historical databases for Earth conflicts. Access granted, Dr. Hyojin. The computer replied in its neutral voice. Search for Battle of Thermopylae. Information filled the screen. Hyojin read through the basic facts. A force of Greeks led by 300 Spartans had indeed held a mountain pass against a much larger Persian army. The numbers seemed impossible, but there they were in the official records. Interesting, she murmured. Computer, search for Battle of Stalingrad. More information appeared. A 6-month siege during Earth's second global war. The city had been surrounded and bombed to rubble, but the defenders had not surrendered. The attacking army had eventually been forced to retreat. Hyojin frowned at the screen. These were not legends. They were documented historical events with dates, names, and casualty reports. The door to her lab opened, and her research assistant walked in. Jiwoo was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes and an eager mind. He was also human, though he had been born on one of the colony worlds. Working late again, Dr. Hyojin? He asked. Jiwoo, good. I need your help with something. She gestured to the screen. Have you ever heard of these battles? Jiwoo looked at the information. Thermopylae and Stalingrad? Of course. Everyone learns about them in school. Are they real? Jiwoo gave her a strange look. Real? Of course they are real. Why would you ask that? Hyejin told him about the conversation in the mess hall. Jiwoo listened carefully, his expression growing more serious. So the alien cadets think these are just made-up stories? He asked. They seem to, Hyejin said. And honestly, the numbers sound impossible. How could a few thousand soldiers hold off hundreds of thousands? Terrain, tactics, and desperation, Jiwoo said simply. At Thermopylae, the pass was so narrow that only a few soldiers could fight at once. The Persians could not use their numbers. At Stalingrad, the city became a maze of rubble that favored defenders. But why not surrender when the situation became hopeless? Jiwoo was quiet for a moment. I think you would have to be human to understand that. What do you mean? Humans do not think the same way as other species, Jiwoo explained. Most aliens see war as a logical process. You fight until the cost becomes too high, then you surrender or retreat. Humans see it differently. How do humans see it? Sometimes, the fight itself is more important than winning, Jiwoo said. Sometimes you fight because giving up would be worse than dying. Hyejin stared at him. That sounds illogical. Maybe, Jiwoo agreed. But it is how we are. The next morning, Hyejin went to see Commander Zeflos, the Academy's headmaster. He was an ancient being from a species called the Monitors. They lived for thousands of years and had been observing the galaxy long before most species achieved spaceflight. His office was large and quiet, with walls covered in star charts and historical documents. Zeflos himself was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shift between silver and gold. Dr. Hyejin, he said in his deep, calm voice. What brings you to see me? I need access to restricted historical files, she said. For what purpose? Hyejin explained about the conversation with the cadets and her research into human military history. Zeflos listened without interruption. You wish to verify whether these human battles actually occurred? He said when she finished. Yes. The alien cadets think they are legends, but if they are real, then perhaps we should understand what they mean. Zeflos finished. Yes, I agree. Computer, grant Dr. Hyejin access to restricted historical archives. Classification level 7. Access granted, the computer replied. Thank you, Commander, Hyejin said. Doctor, Zeflos said as she turned to leave. Be careful what you look for. Sometimes the truth is more disturbing than the legend. Back in her laboratory, Hyejin and Jiwoo began searching through files that few beings in the galaxy had ever seen. These were observation reports from alien scouts and explorers who had visited Earth over the centuries. Look at this, Jiwoo said, pointing to his screen. A Vorth observation post recorded the Battle of Thermopylae. They were studying early human warfare. Hyejin read over his shoulder. The report was written in clinical scientific language. It described the Greek tactics, the Persian responses, and the final outcome. But between the lines, she could sense the confusion of the alien observers. They did not understand why the humans kept fighting, she said. Here's another one, Jiwoo called out. Krell scouts observed D-Day during World War II. Listen to this. Human forces suffered enormous casualties during the beach assault. Expected immediate retreat. Instead, they continued advancing. Recommend further study of human psychological makeup. Hyejin felt a chill run down her spine. These are not legends, Jiwoo. These are documented observations by alien species. And there are dozens of them, Jiwoo said, scrolling through the files. Almost every major human conflict has been observed and recorded by someone. They worked through the night reading report after report. Each one told the same story in different words. Humans who fought impossible odds. Humans who refused to surrender. Humans who treated death as preferable to defeat. Dr. Hyejin, Jiwoo, said finally. I think I understand why the other species find our stories hard to believe. Why? Because they have never met anyone like us before, he said. Every other species in the galaxy is logical about war. They fight to win, and they surrender when they cannot win. But humans fight for reasons that have nothing to do with logic. He-Jin finished. Exactly. And that terrifies them. He-Jin looked around her laboratory at all the data they had collected. Hundreds of reports from dozens of alien species all saying the same thing. Humans were different. Humans were unpredictable. Humans did not follow the normal rules of warfare. Jiwoo, she said slowly. I think we need to share this information. With who? With everyone, she said. The cadets, the faculty, the Alliance Command. If these reports are accurate, then the galaxy needs to understand what humans really are. And what are we? He-Jin was quiet for a long moment, staring at the data on her screens. I am not sure yet, but I do not think we are what anyone expected. Su-Jin was the head archivist for the Galactic Alliance, and she had never seen Dr. He-Jin look so troubled. The human scientist sat across from her desk, surrounded by data tablets and looking like she had not slept in days. I need access to the deepest archives, He-Jin said. The ones that require special clearance. Su-Jin was human too, though she had spent most of her life working with alien records. She was older than He-Jin, with gray hair and tired eyes. She had seen enough classified information to know when something was serious. What exactly are you looking for? Su-Jin asked. First contact reports, He-Jin said. Every species that has ever observed Earth. I want to know what they saw, what they thought, and what they reported back to their governments. Su-Jin was quiet for a moment. Those files are classified for good reasons, He-Jin. Some of them contain information that could damage diplomatic relations. I have Commander Zephlos's authorization, He-Jin said, handing over a data pad. Su-Jin read the authorization and sighed. This is about the human war stories, is not it? You have heard about them? Word travels fast in a place like this, Su-Jin said. The alien cadets are starting to ask questions. Some of the faculty, too. She stood up and walked to a secure terminal. After entering several passwords and submitting to biometric scans, a new database appeared on the screen. These are the first contact reports from every major species in the Alliance, Su-Jin said. Most of them observed Earth for decades or even centuries before making official contact. He-Jin moved to look at the screen. The list of files was enormous. Where should I start? Try the Vorth reports, Su-Jin suggested. They were some of the earliest observers. He-Jin opened the first file. It was dated over 2,000 years ago, written in the clinical style that Vorth used for all their scientific observations. Subject: Third planet of Sol system. Inhabitants: bipedal humanoids, technologically primitive. Observation focus: social behavior and conflict resolution. The report went on to describe early human civilizations. The Vorth had been particularly interested in how humans fought wars. What they found had confused them. Subjects display unusual attachment to abstract concepts such as honor and duty. He-Jin read aloud. Will suffer significant casualties to defend positions with no strategic value. Recommend psychological study to understand motivation. They did not understand us even then, Su-Jin observed. He-Jin opened more files. Each one told a similar story. The Krell had observed the Roman Empire and been puzzled by gladiators who fought to the death for entertainment. The Nix had studied medieval knights and could not understand why they followed codes of honor that often led to their deaths. Look at this one, He-Jin said, opening a file from the ethereal observers. They watched the siege of Masada. Su-Jin read over her shoulder. 900 Jewish defenders held a mountain fortress against 15,000 Roman soldiers. When defeat became certain, they chose death rather than slavery. The ethereals called it incomprehensible mass suicide, He-Jin noted. They recommended that their government avoid contact with humans until our psychology could be better understood. They continued reading through the files. Each report painted the same picture. Humans who fought when they should have surrendered. Humans who died for ideas rather than living for practical benefits. Humans who seemed to prefer death with honor over life with shame. Here is something interesting, Su-Jin said, pointing to a Nix report. They studied the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising during World War II. Hee-jin read the report carefully. The Knicks were empaths who could sense emotions across vast distances. Their observer had been overwhelmed by what they felt from the ghetto fighters. The subjects knew they could not win, she read. Their weapons were inferior, their numbers small, their position hopeless. Yet their emotional state showed no despair, no fear of death. Instead, there was a fierce joy in simply fighting back. This observer required medical treatment after exposure to such intense emotional resonance. The Knicks observer had a breakdown, Soo-jin said quietly, just from feeling what the human fighters felt. They worked through the afternoon, reading report after report. A pattern emerged that was both clear and disturbing. Every alien species that had observed humans had reached the same conclusion. Humans were unpredictable, dangerous, and impossible to understand. Dong-woo, a military historian from the academy, joined them in the evening. He was a short, serious man who specialized in comparative warfare between species. "I heard you were researching human military history," he said. "I brought some files that might interest you." He set down a stack of data tablets. "These are psychological evaluations of human prisoners of war, conducted by various alien species over the centuries." Hye-jin picked up the first tablet. It contained interviews with human soldiers captured during various conflicts. The aliens had been trying to understand what made humans fight so fiercely. "Listen to this," she said. A Krell interrogator questioning a captured human pilot. "Why did you not eject when your aircraft was damaged?" The human answered, "My wingman was in trouble. I had to cover his escape." The Krell noted that the human's aircraft was destroyed less than 30 seconds later, Dong-woo added. "The pilot died, but his wingman survived." Soo-jin shook her head. The Krell concluded that humans suffer from a form of species-wide mental illness that prevents logical self-preservation. They read more interviews. Human soldiers who refused to give military information even under torture. Human civilians who hid resistance fighters knowing they would be killed if discovered. Human medics who ran into enemy fire to save wounded soldiers. "Here is one that particularly disturbed the interrogators," Dong-woo said, handing Hye-jin another tablet. "A human Marine captured during a colonial war. The aliens asked him why he kept fighting when his position was overrun. He said, 'Because my buddies were counting on me.'" "What is disturbing about that?" Hye-jin asked. "All his buddies were already dead," Dong-woo explained. "He was the only survivor, but he kept fighting for 2 more hours, holding the position alone." Hye-jin felt a chill. The aliens could not understand why he would fight for dead people. They concluded that humans form emotional bonds so strong that death does not break them, Soo-jin said. "That is terrifying to species that think logically about survival." As the evening wore on, the pattern became clearer. Humans did not fight the way other species fought. They did not surrender when defeat was certain. They did not retreat when the odds were impossible. They did not abandon their comrades, their principles, or their duties even when doing so would save their lives. "I am starting to understand why the alien cadets laughed at our legends," Hee-jin said. "From their perspective, our behavior is insane." "But that is not the worst part," Dong-woo said. He pulled up a file on his tablet. "Look at this." The file was marked with the highest security classification. It was a joint report from all the major alien governments, written just before first official contact with Earth. Recommendation: extreme caution in dealing with Sol 3 inhabitants. Hye-jin read. Species displays unprecedented levels of aggression, unpredictability, and resistance to logical negotiation. However, same traits make them potentially valuable as military allies. Suggest recruitment for Alliance armed forces, but maintain careful observation. Soo-jin stared at the screen. "They recruited us because they were afraid of us." "Not afraid exactly," Dong-woo corrected. "More like, they realized that humans could be pointed at their enemies instead of at them." Hye-jin sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by what they had discovered. "So the stories the cadets were laughing at are all true," Sujin finished, and they represent just a tiny fraction of human military history. Every major power in the galaxy has been watching us fight for thousands of years, Dongwu added. They have detailed records of our wars, our tactics, and our psychology. And they still do not understand us, Yejin said. No, Sujin agreed. And I think that frightens them more than anything else. Yejin looked around at all the data they had collected. Thousands of reports, hundreds of species, centuries of observations. All saying the same thing. Humans were different. Humans were dangerous. Humans did not follow the rules. We need to tell people about this, she said finally. The alien cadets who were laughing at our stories, Dongwu asked. Everyone, Hyejin said. The faculty, the students, the Alliance Command. They need to know that human legends are not legends at all. They are documentation of what we really are. And what are we? Sujin asked. Hyejin stared at the data on the screens around them. I am not sure yet, but I think we are something the galaxy has never seen before. The Academy's main briefing room had never been so quiet. Representatives from every major species in the Galactic Alliance sat around the circular table, their faces showing various degrees of confusion and concern. Dr. Hyejin stood at the front of the room, surrounded by holographic displays showing centuries of data. Commander Zeflos sat at the head of the table, his ancient eyes focused on Hyejin. To his left was General Korth, a massive Vorth with battle scars covering his scaled hide. To his right sat Admiral Zixtra of the Krell Navy, her forearms folded as she listened. Thank you all for coming, Hyejin began. What I'm about to show you will change how you think about humans. This better be important, General Korth rumbled. I have a fleet exercise to oversee. It is important, Hyejin said. She activated the first hologram. For the past week, I have been researching human military history. What I found was disturbing. The hologram showed the Battle of Thermopylae. Tiny figures representing Greek. Soldiers faced a massive wave representing the Persian army. 300 Spartans and 7,000 allied Greeks held this mountain pass for 3 days against 200,000 Persians, Hyejin said. The alien cadets thought this was a legend, but it is documented fact. Impressive tactics. Admiral Zixtra clicked. Using terrain to negate superior numbers is basic strategy. That is not the remarkable part, Hyejin said. She changed the hologram to show the final day of the battle. On the third day, the Greeks were surrounded. Defeat was certain. Any logical commander would have surrendered to save lives. But they did not surrender, Commander Zeflos said quietly. No, they fought to the last man. Hyejin looked around the table. This is where human psychology becomes unique. She activated another hologram showing the siege of Stalingrad. 6 months. A city surrounded, bombed to rubble, running out of food and ammunition. Any other species would have surrendered within weeks. The humans held out for 6 months, General Korth asked, leaning forward. They held out until the attacking army gave up and retreated, Hyejin said. The besiegers lost the siege. Confused murmurs filled the room. This went against everything they knew about warfare. How is that possible? Admiral Zixtra demanded. Hyejin activated a new set of displays. These are observation reports from your own species. Vorth scouts watched Thermopylae. Krell observers documented Stalingrad. Nyx empaths studied the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. The room fell silent as they read their own people's reports. Your ancestors have been watching human warfare for over 2,000 years, Hyejin continued. Every major conflict has been observed and documented, and every report reaches the same conclusion. Which is? General Korth asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. Humans do not fight like other species, Hyejin said. We do not surrender when defeat is certain. We do not retreat when the odds are impossible. We do not abandon our comrades, our duties or our principles, even when death is the guaranteed result. Wu Jin, the Academy's tactical instructor, raised his hand. He was human, a former soldier who now taught strategy to alien cadets. Permission to speak, sir, he asked. Granted, Commander Zeflo said. The other species think logically about war, Wu Jin said. You fight to achieve objectives. When the cost becomes too high, you withdraw. When defeat is certain, you surrender. This preserves lives and resources for future battles. That is correct, General Korth said. Basic military logic. Humans do not think that way, Wu Jin continued. Sometimes we fight because the fighting itself matters more than winning. Sometimes death with honor is preferable to life with shame. That is illogical, Admiral Zixtra said. Yes, Wu Jin agreed. Completely illogical. And that is what makes us dangerous. He Jin activated another display. This is a psychological profile compiled by Joint Alien Intelligence Services. It was written just before first contact with Earth. She read from the report. Human warriors display unprecedented resistance to fear, pain, and logical self-preservation. They will continue fighting with broken bones, severe blood loss, and, in hopeless tactical situations, recommend extreme caution in any military engagement. They were afraid of us, Ye Jin, the diplomatic representative said quietly. Afraid enough to recruit us instead of fighting us, Ye Jin confirmed. The Galactic Alliance offered Earth membership not because they needed our technology or resources. They needed us. Commander Zeflo spoke for the first time since the briefing began. Show them the prisoner interviews. He Jin nodded and activated a new set of displays. These are interrogation records from various conflicts. Human prisoners of war, questioned by alien captors trying to understand our psychology. She read from one report. Subject, human fighter pilot, captured after aircraft destroyed while attempting to rescue downed comrade. When asked why he did not preserve his own life by fleeing, subject replied, "You do not leave people behind." Subject maintained this position despite torture and threats of execution. The interrogators noted that the comrade was already dead. Hyojin added. The pilot knew this but attempted the rescue anyway. General Korth's scales rippled, a sign of agitation among his people. That is not tactical thinking. That is emotional madness. Here is another, Hyojin continued. Human Marine, last survivor of overrun position, held the line alone for 3 hours against superior forces. When captured, interrogators asked why he did not surrender. His answer, because surrender was not an option. Not an option? Admiral Zixtra clicked. Surrender is always an option when faced with certain death. Not for humans, Wu Jin said. Sometimes we would rather die than quit. The room was quiet for a long moment. The alien representatives looked at each other, then at the humans in the room as if seeing them for the first time. There is more, Ye Jin said. She activated the final display. These are casualty reports from human military units throughout history. The pattern is consistent across all conflicts and time periods. The display showed statistics that made several aliens gasp. Human units that had suffered 90% casualties and continued fighting. Soldiers who had fought for days with wounds that would incapacitate most species. Entire armies that had chosen death over surrender. The charge of the Light Brigade, Hyojin said. 600 cavalry charged directly into enemy artillery. They knew it was suicide. They did it anyway because they had been ordered to. The defenders of the Alamo, she continued. 180 men against 5,000. They could have escaped. They chose to stay and fight. Kamikaze pilots in World War II. They turned their aircraft into weapons and flew them into enemy ships. Guaranteed death, but it was their duty. General Korth stood up abruptly. This is enough. You are describing a species of madmen. Are we? Wu Jin asked, also standing. Or are we describing something you have never encountered before? What do you mean? Commander Zeflos asked. Every species in this room thinks about war the same way, Wu Jin explained. You fight to win. You retreat to preserve forces. You surrender to save lives. War is a tool to achieve political goals. He looked around the table. Humans sometimes fight for reasons that have nothing to do with winning. We fight for ideas. We fight for each other. We fight because some things are worth dying for. That is primitive thinking, Admiral Zixtra said. Maybe, Wu Jin agreed, but it is also effective. How many human units have you seen break under pressure? The aliens looked at each other. They had all served with human forces. They had all seen human soldiers in action. None, General Korth admitted reluctantly. How many human soldiers have you seen surrender when their comrades were still fighting? Again silence. How many humans have you seen quit when the mission was not complete? We begin to understand, Commander Zeflo said slowly. You are not describing madness. You are describing reliability. Exactly, Hyejin said. Humans may not be the strongest or fastest or smartest species in the galaxy, but you can predict exactly what we will do in any situation. Which is? General Korth asked. We will fight, Wu Jin said simply. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, no matter the situation. If there is a fight to be fought, humans will fight it. Commander Zeflos looked around the table at his officers. This changes our understanding of human capabilities considerably. It should also change how you treat the human cadets, Yejin said. The stories they can tell you are not legends or propaganda. They are historical records of what humans actually do. And what humans will do again, Wu Jin added, if the situation requires it. The briefing room was quiet for a long time as the alien representatives absorbed what they had learned. Finally, Commander Zeflo spoke. Dr. Hyejin, I want this information distributed to all Academy faculty and senior cadets. It is time the galaxy understood what humanity brings to the Alliance. Yes, sir, Hyejin said. As the representatives filed out, General Korth stopped beside Wu Jin. Human, he said. Your species disturbs me. Why? Wu Jin asked. Because I am beginning to understand that when humans say they will never give up, you actually mean it. Wu Jin smiled. Now you are learning. The Academy's Combat Simulation Center was the most advanced training facility in the galaxy. The room could create any environment, any enemy, and any situation that cadets might face in real combat. It had been 3 days since Dr. Hyejin's briefing and the alien cadets were still struggling to accept what they had learned. Beltar paced back and forth in the observation deck above the simulation room. His reptilian features showed clear agitation. I do not believe it, he said for the 10th time. The reports must be exaggerated. Chikta, the Krell warrior, clicked her mandibles nervously. The evidence was quite detailed. Evidence can be fabricated, Veltar insisted. No species can be that. That's suicidal. Lysandra, the Nyx empath, sat quietly in the corner. She had been sensing the emotions of the human cadets for days, and what she felt made her uncomfortable. There was something different about them, something that did not match any other species she had encountered. There is only one way to find out, said Kexmar, a tall ethereal who had joined their group after the briefing. We test them. Test them how? Veltar asked. Combat simulations, Kexmar said. We create impossible scenarios and see how they respond. If the reports are true, they will react differently than we would. Chikta's 4 arms moved in agreement. Yes, we put them in situations where surrender is the logical choice. If they are truly different, they will not surrender. And if they do surrender? Lysandra asked. Then we know the stories are exaggerated, Veltar said. And humans are just another logical species with good propaganda. Below them in the simulation room, 4 human cadets were preparing for what they thought was a routine training exercise. Taemin checked his simulated weapon while his teammates did the same. Minho was the team's engineer, a quiet young man who specialized in technical solutions. So Young was their medic, small but fierce, with steady hands and quick thinking. Jae Sung was their pilot and communications expert, always ready with a joke to keep morale up. Standard patrol scenario, Taemin said, reading the mission briefing. Sweep and clear, locate any enemy forces, complete the objective. Seems simple enough, Minho said. Too simple, So Young added. The instructors never give us easy missions. Maybe they are being nice to us today, Jae-sung suggested with a grin. In the observation deck, Veltar was working with the simulation controls. I am setting the parameters, he said. We start with a standard scenario, then escalate until surrender becomes the only logical option. What kind of escalation? Kexmar asked. Equipment failures, overwhelming enemy forces, impossible terrain, Veltar listed. Everything that should force them to give up. The simulation began. The human team found themselves in a mountainous region with thick forest cover. Their mission was to secure a communication relay station that had gone offline. For Yar, the first hour, everything went normally. The humans moved tactically through the terrain, communicating clearly and working as a team. They encountered light resistance and handled it professionally. They seemed competent but not exceptional, Chikta observed. Wait, Veltar said, increasing the difficulty. Computer, introduce equipment malfunctions. Suddenly, Minho's technical scanner failed. Then So-young's medical kit began showing error messages. Jae-sung's communication system went dead. Well, that is not good, Jae-sung said, but he was still smiling. We continue the mission, Tae-min decided. We can work around the equipment failures. Veltar frowned. Most alien teams would request extraction when their equipment failed. Computer, increase enemy resistance. The simulated enemy forces doubled, then tripled. The human team found themselves facing overwhelming odds. We are seriously outnumbered, Minho reported, taking cover behind a simulated rock. How many do you count? Tae-min asked. At least 50, maybe more. So-young said. We have maybe 20 rounds each. Any logical species would retreat or call for backup. Veltar waited for the humans to make the smart choice. All right, team, Tae-min said. Here is what we do. Minho, you and Jae-sung create a distraction on the left flank. So, Young and I will push through the center to the objective. That is suicide, Veltar muttered. They will all die. But the humans were already moving. Minho and Jae-sung began making noise and firing randomly to draw attention. Meanwhile, Tae-min and So-young started a careful advance toward the communication relay. They are not retreating, Lysandra said, her empathic senses fully focused on the humans below. I can feel their emotions. They are scared, but they are not considering retreat. Computer, disable their weapons, Veltar ordered. Tae-min's rifle stopped working. So did So-young's. Weapons are down, So-young reported calmly. Switch to backup plan, Tae-min said. What backup plan? Minho called out. We make one up, Tae-min replied. He picked up a rock and threw it at an enemy sensor. So-young began moving forward using only cover and stealth. They were improvising solutions faster than the computer could create problems. This is impossible, Chikta said. They have no weapons, no equipment, and they are outnumbered 20-1. And they are still advancing toward the objective, Kexmar added, his voice showing amazement. Veltar was becoming desperate. Computer, wound the team leader. The simulation indicated that Tae-min had been hit by enemy fire. His leg was badly injured and he was losing blood. I am hit, Tae-min reported. Continue the mission. We are not leaving you, So-young said. Immediately. The mission comes first, Tae-min argued. The team comes first, So-young corrected, and began treating his wound with improvised materials since her medical kit had failed. In the observation deck, the alien cadets watched in stunned silence. Lysandra's empathic senses were being overwhelmed by what she felt from the humans. What are they feeling? Veltar asked. Fear, Lysandra said quietly. Pain, exhaustion, but also something else. What? Determination. They are absolutely determined to complete the mission and protect each other. The concept of failure does not seem to exist in their minds. Veltar made the scenario even worse. Computer, enemy reinforcements arriving. Increase enemy forces to 100. Add air support. Simulate artillery bombardment. The simulation, room filled with explosions and enemy fire. The human team was now facing impossible odds with broken equipment and wounded personnel. This has got to be a nightmare, Jae-sung said, but he was still trying to make jokes.
Anyone else thinking this training scenario might be a little unfair? We adapt, Taemin said simply. Minho, can you jury-rig anything useful from the broken equipment? Maybe, Minho said, already taking apart his scanner. Give me 5
minutes. So, Young, how much medical supplies do we have? Enough for basic treatment if we are creative, she replied. Jae-sung, any ideas for dealing with those aircraft? Working on it, Jae-sung said, examining the terrain. If we can get to that ridge, we might be able to use the rocks as cover. Veltar stared at the display in disbelief. The humans were treating an impossible situation as merely a difficult problem to solve. Computer, make the scenario completely hopeless, he ordered. Equipment totally destroyed, team members critically wounded, enemy forces unlimited. The simulation complied. Now all their equipment was broken, half the team was seriously injured, and they faced an army with air support, artillery, and overwhelming numbers. Okay, Taemin said, looking around at his battered team. This is not going well. Understatement of the year, Minho agreed. But we are not dead yet, So Young pointed out. And the mission is still possible, Jae-sung added. The alien cadets in the observation deck looked at each other in shock. They are not even considering surrender, Chikta whispered. The situation is completely hopeless, Kexmar said. Any logical species would give up. But they are not logical, Lysandra said, her voice filled with wonder and fear. They are something else entirely. Below, the human team was still planning their next move. Here is what we do, Taemin said. We split up. 2 teams. Different approaches. If one team fails, the other might still complete the mission. And if both teams fail? Minho asked. Then we try something else, Taemin said simply. Veltar finally understood what he was seeing. The humans were not going to surrender. No matter how bad the situation became, no matter how hopeless the odds, they would keep fighting and keep trying until they were all dead. Computer and simulation, he said quietly. The hostile environment disappeared, leaving the 4 human cadets standing in an empty room. They looked around in confusion. Did we win? Jae-sung asked. I am not sure. We were supposed to, So Young replied. In the observation deck, the alien cadets sat in stunned silence. They had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare, logic, and survival. The reports were not exaggerated, Veltar said finally. If anything, they were understated. What do we do with this information? Chikta asked. Lysandra looked down at the human team who were now joking and laughing as they left the simulation room. We remember, she said, that when humans say they will never give up, they mean it literally. 6 months had passed since the simulation that changed everything at the Academy. The graduation ceremony was held in the Academy's Grand Assembly Hall, with representatives from across the galaxy in attendance. The atmosphere was different from previous years, though most of the new arrivals could not quite understand why. Hyunwoo was one of the newest human cadets to arrive at the Academy. He was young, eager, and completely unprepared for what he found. As he walked through the corridors on his first day, he noticed something strange. The alien cadets were not laughing at humans anymore. Instead, they watched them with something that looked almost like respect. Excuse me, Hyunwoo said to a group of 4th cadets. Can you tell me where the mess hall is? The reptilian aliens immediately stood at attention. Yes, sir, the largest one said. Follow this corridor to the... And then turn right, sir. Hyunwoo was confused. I'm just a first-year cadet. You are human, the Vorth said simply. That is enough. Hyunwoo found the mess hall and got his food. As he looked for a place to sit, he noticed that other cadets were making room for him at their tables. Alien species that usually kept to themselves were inviting him to join them. He sat down next to a young Krell warrior named Zitka. Is it always like this? He asked. Like what? Zitka replied. So, friendly. I heard that aliens used to make fun of human military stories. Zitka's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. That was before we learned the truth. What? Truth? Before Zitka could answer, Taman appeared at their table. He was now a senior cadet respected by aliens and humans alike. His calm demeanor had not changed, but there was something different about how others looked at him. Mind if I sit? Taman asked. Please, Hyunwoo said quickly. I was just asking about the atmosphere here. It seems different from what I expected. Taman sat down and looked around the mess hall. Humans and aliens were eating together, talking quietly, sharing stories. But the dynamic had completely changed from 6 months ago. What did you expect? Taman asked. Well, I heard that alien cadets used to laugh at human legends, stories about impossible battles and soldiers who never gave up. They did, Taman confirmed. But they do not laugh anymore. Why not? Taman was quiet for a moment. Because they learned that our legends are not legends at all. Across the mess hall, Veltar sat with his own group. The large Vorth, who had once mocked human stories, now studied them like military manuals. He had requested access to human military history courses and spent his free time reading about battles like Thermopylae and Stalingrad. Veltar, his fellow Vorth asked, "Why do you spend so much time studying human warfare?" "Because I want to understand how they think," Veltar replied. "In 6 months I will graduate and serve in the Alliance military. I might serve alongside humans. I need to know what they are capable of." "And what are they capable of?" Veltar looked across the room at Taman and the other human cadets. Things that should be impossible. At another table, Chikta was explaining to younger Krell cadets about the simulation test. "We tried to make them surrender," she said. "We made the scenario hopeless, no weapons, no equipment, wounded teammates, impossible odds." "And they surrendered?" a young Krell asked. "No," Chikta said. "They kept fighting. They treated impossible as just another problem to solve." "That is illogical." "Yes," Chikta agreed. "And that is what makes them dangerous." Lysandra, the Nyx empath, had perhaps been affected most by what she had learned about humans. Her ability to sense emotions had given her unique insight into human psychology. "Their minds work differently," she explained to her fellow Nyx. "When most species face certain death, their emotions turn to fear, despair, and self-preservation. Humans feel the fear, but they also feel something else." "What?" "Duty, honor, love for their teammates. These emotions are stronger than their fear of death." "That seems overwhelming." "It is," Lysandra said. "I had to learn to shield myself when around humans during combat training. Their emotional intensity is unlike anything we have encountered." As the days passed, word of the human cadets' capabilities spread throughout the academy. Faculty members who had once dismissed human stories as primitive legends now studied them as case examples of superior military psychology. Commander Zeflos called a meeting with all senior faculty to discuss the implications. "The graduation ceremony is in 2 weeks," he announced. "For the first time in Academy history, we will have a graduating class that truly understands what humans bring to the Alliance." "How should we address this in the ceremony?" asked Professor Enthek, the Academy's Chief of Military Studies. "Honestly," Zeflos replied, "for too long we have misunderstood humanity's place in the galaxy. We thought we were recruiting them because they were expendable. We now know we were recruiting them because they are irreplaceable." Dr. Hae-jin, who had been invited to the key meeting, raised her hand. "Commander, I have completed my research into human military psychology. Would you like me to present my findings to the graduating class?" "What did you conclude?" Zeflos asked. "That human legends are not exaggerations," Hae-jin said. "If anything, they understate human capabilities. Every story the alien cadets initially laughed at was a conservative retelling of historical events." "Conservative how?" "The odds were usually worse than the stories claimed. The casualties were higher. The situations were more hopeless, but the humans fought anyway." The graduation ceremony itself was unlike any previous year. Commander Zeflos stood at the podium, looking out at the mixed crowd of human and alien cadets who would soon serve together in the Alliance military. "Graduating cadets," he began. "You represent the future of galactic peace and security. You have learned to fight together, think together, and trust each other with your lives." He paused, looking specifically at the alien cadets. "Some of you came here with misconceptions about your human classmates. You may have heard stories that seemed impossible. Tales of soldiers who fought against hopeless odds, who refused to surrender, who chose death before dishonor." The alien cadets shifted uncomfortably, remembering their early mockery. "You have learned that these are not stories," Zephylos continued. "They are historical documentation of what humans actually do when faced with impossible situations. And you have learned something even more important." "What is that?" called out one of the graduating cadets. "You have learned that when humans say they will never give up, they mean it literally," Zephylos said. "This is not bravado or propaganda. It is simple fact." He gestured to the human cadets. "These individuals represent a species that considers death before dishonor a reasonable tactical option. They view impossible odds as merely difficult problems to solve. They will fight for their teammates, their principles, and their duty, even when logic says they should surrender." The graduation ceremony continued with the traditional presentation of assignments. Human and alien cadets would serve together on ships and stations throughout the galaxy. As the ceremony ended, Veltar approached Taemin. The large Vorth had been assigned to the same ship as the human. "Taemin," he said formally, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For laughing at your people's military history. I understand now that I was mocking things I did not comprehend." Taemin smiled. "You were not the first to make that mistake. You probably will not be the last." "I have a question," Veltar said. "In that simulation, when everything went wrong and the situation became hopeless, did you ever consider surrendering?" Taemin thought about it seriously. "Honestly? No, it never occurred to me." "Why not?" "Because that is not what humans do," Taemin said simply. "We keep fighting until we win, until we die, or until someone makes us stop. Surrender is just not part of how we think." Veltar nodded slowly. "I am beginning to understand why the Alliance wanted humans as allies rather than enemies." "Smart choice," Taemin agreed. As the new graduates prepared to leave the academy, the incoming class of cadets arrived. Among them were aliens who had heard the old stories about humans and expected to find primitive warriors with exaggerated legends. Hyun-woo, now a veteran of several months at the academy, watched the new arrivals with amusement. He spotted a group of young ethereals pointing at the human cadets and whispering among themselves. "First day?" he asked one of them. "Yes," the ethereal replied. "We have heard stories about human military capabilities. Surely they are exaggerated." Hyun-woo smiled. "You will find out soon enough." The ethereal looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You will learn the same thing everyone learns here," Hyun-woo said. "Human legends are not legends. They are history, and history has a way of repeating itself." As the new cadets settled in for their first night at the academy, the graduating class prepared for their assignments throughout the galaxy. They would serve as officers, commanders, and specialists in the Alliance military. But more importantly, they would serve as teachers. Every alien who worked with a human would learn the same lesson that the academy cadets had learned. When humans said they would never give up, they meant it. When they promised to stand by their allies, they kept that promise. When they swore to complete the mission, they would complete it or die trying. The galaxy was about to discover that human legends were not about the past. They were about what humans would do in the future.